Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Game vs. Real. For those who are unfamiliar with this series, it's very simple. It's a position which this channel allows me to be in, which is a relatively unique one on YouTube, and that is somebody who loves, plays, and features racing video games a lot, but also has access to high-performance vehicles in real life. Those two things don't tend to cross over on YouTube that much. You have gamers and you have car reviewers. Not many channels do both, and that puts me in a very privileged position. And that position is to compare the games, which I know and love and sometimes even play every day, to the real vehicles, be it a car or a bike, could be a supercar, a hot hatch, whatever that case may be. And on this occasion we're featuring yet another new game in the series with episode 5, Forza Motorsport 7, and the particular car, as you saw from the title, is the Mercedes C32 AMG. Now if you'd like to learn more just about that car, I did a full review of the car on the road, and you can actually check out that review by clicking the link right below this video. It was a lot of fun to drive and a really cool little car, something, as I said, of an undervalued performance vehicle. But here's the question. How does Forza stack up? Because we've talked about Forza twice in this series. The first episode was the BMW i8 in Forza Horizon 4 compared to real life, and then of course we talked about my Maserati Quattroporte in Forza Motorsport 4 compared to real life. Now we're moving forward in time. Not quite as new as Horizon 4, certainly newer than Motorsport 4 though, Motorsport 7. Now Forza 7 is a game that is aiming to be relatively realistic, but not necessarily as realistic as something like a Project Cars or an AC. So how does it stack up? Well, we're going to break it down into 3 things, as we always do. 3 scoring types, and then, based on those put together, I'm going to give it a letter grade as far as how I believe the game did compared to real life. The first thing is accuracy. That's very easy to find out. Do the specs line up to real life? Secondly, the realism. Does the car perform, sound, and feel like it should compared to real life? The handling characteristics, the noises it makes, the way it shifts its weight through corners, etc. And last but definitely not least, you could even say technically the most important of the 3, the fun factor. Essentially, the fun factor combines the previous 2, the accuracy, the realism, etc., and puts it together in such a way that the video game version of that car or motorcycle feels and has the character and the personality and the fun factor that the real vehicle does. And of course there's only so far a video game can go in that regard, but still, you'd actually be surprised how often video games get it right. Some of them don't though, so let's find out how Forza 7 does. First of all, accuracy. Well, straight off the bat, it's a good start because I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. As far as this Mercedes goes, which is not exactly a high priority vehicle within Forza 7, it's been in previous Forza games as well. It's not like it's a fan favourite car within the game, it tends to be an undervalued one, but they still got it spot on. The power, the weight, even the weight displacement within the vehicle from the front to the back, the torque, it's all spot on. There are multiple websites where you can corroborate this stuff, the EU specs in particular. They get it dead on right, for pounds, for kilos, for horsepower, for torque. Across the board, I was very impressed. Plus, of course, the accuracy also takes into account the graphics. How accurate to real life does the car look? If the headlights are 3 times the size as they should be, or if the vehicle looks disproportionate in some way, well of course that is going to affect the accuracy. But across the board, once again, of course you can always improve graphics with newer games and newer generation consoles, but as far as the power and the console that this is working with, I think Forza 7 did a pretty good job. It's not quite as crisp and as highly detailed and as perfectly proportioned as some of the other cars in the game, but again, I kind of understand that. As I said, the C32 isn't exactly a fan favourite, it's a relatively low priority car as far as the vehicles in the game go, so considering how few people, generally speaking, are going to use this car in the game, I think they did more than an adequate job of making the interior look accurate, the exterior, the sound is also accurate to real life, and the performance and spec is good. That's a great start. What though about the realism? Because this is what many people think of when you talk about how realistic a racing game is. If you mention that to someone or ask, how realistic is Gran Turismo? How realistic is Project Cars? Well, the first thing that their mind goes to tends to be what? Cornering, handling, how the car feels around a turn on a circuit. That tends to be the way that we measure realism. So how does this particular game stack up? Well, for reference, I am driving on a controller. I know some people think that that's kind of weird, comparing a controller instead of a wheel to a real car. Well, I've driven plenty of real cars and I've used plenty of racing wheels, and I can categorically tell you, no racing wheel that I've ever used feels realistic. So forget that argument, it just doesn't work. So, controller to one side, how does the vehicle perform in the game? With simulation steering, no traction control, no stability manager, none of that kind of stuff. Well, unfortunately this one's more of a mixed bag, because again, it looks good on the track, it looks and shifts around through corners like the real vehicle should. The sound is still good, again authentic to the real machine, and all of that does factor in. But when it comes to the handling, it's actually kind of weird, because multiple times around this, for instance, Silverstone lap or number of laps that I did, you can see that the car has this tendency, a very strong tendency in fact, to spin up one wheel due to the diff setup. That is not accurate to real life. And it's not just about driving faster on this track than I would be in real life. Even at speeds that I was doing in real life, down around 35, 40 miles an hour through a corner, it's still doing it all the time. The real car didn't even have a hint of that, so that is quite simply not realistic. Plus, the version that I drove was the estate version, or the wagon, in other words for our American friends, so if anything, that one should have been even more inclined to wheel spin and understeer, but it simply wasn't. Even as far as the handling, it's kind of weird in this game, to be honest, because it's unusually heavy. In fact, that constant one wheel spinning up, combined with the excessive low speed understeer, almost makes this car feel in a weird sort of way like it's front wheel drive sometimes. And that's very odd, because it isn't. It's rear wheel drive. So they actually did, I would say, a pretty bad job, and I hate to have to say that because I do love the Forza series, but on this occasion, no, it's just not accurate to real life. The real experience that I had in the C32 AMG was nothing like what it is in the game. It's actually one of the most playful and one of the most responsive cars for handling, for braking, and for acceleration that I've ever driven. It was extremely fun. The car had tons of character, tons of personality. It actually felt like driving a hot hatch, but with a lot more power and a longer wheelbase. It doesn't feel anything like that in the game. In fact, in the game, it feels more like what you'd expect from something like a Vauxhall Vectra VXR, or some kind of underwhelming front-wheel drive Q car from the UK, like a Ford Mondeo or a Vauxhall Vectra. That is so far from what the real thing feels like that it's kind of insulting to the car. Now, once again, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that they did that, because it is a low priority vehicle, and I suspect that they didn't put anywhere near the amount of time into this car that they would with other vehicles. You know, there's more people, for instance, using an Aston Martin Vulcan than a Mercedes C32, so you would expect certain cars to be a higher priority, and I think that that is the case here. This one is simply lower. So although I understand why this has happened, it's also inaccurate, and I have to be honest about that. And overall, it's actually so inaccurate in the case of the handling in particular, but even the lack of throttle response, the fairly weak brakes, which again feel nothing like the real car, I'm going to have to give it a 2, and that's fairly generous, because the only things that they get right about its performance in action are the way it sounds, and the actual performance which it has. It is quick in a straight line, and the real C32 is a deceptively fast car. I mean, it's a V6 engined C-Class that can do 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. That is a sleeper, it really is. In the game, it does have great performance, just like it should. It really is the cornering and the handling that unfortunately lets it down. What then as far as the fun factor? Well, as you'd probably assume, that previous score is definitely going to affect this one as well. However, I'm not going to be quite as harsh, and the reason why is because the fun factor takes into account, as I said earlier, both of the previous scores. So it's not just about the handling, it's about the whole experience, including the visuals, the sound, the spec, and the overall respect that they give to the car in the game. Is it as good as it should be compared to real life? And as I said, I'm going to be just a little bit more generous on this occasion with a 3 out of 5. And to be honest, that is as high as I can go, because the handling is just so off, and the driving manners, the personality of the car, the character, it's just not there. This car has next to no personality in the game. In fact, as much as I hate to say it, the C32 AMG in Forza 7 is borderline boring. And that is a very, very inaccurate thing to happen, because the real car is nothing close to boring. It was a lot of fun, it sounds great, the handling is sharp, deceptively good for a car of its size and especially length. It was a great car, a great experience, and a whole lot of fun. As far as Forza goes, I'm kind of disappointed by them, because with the Maserati they did a serviceable job, with the BMW they did a pretty decent job. On this occasion though, they really dropped the ball. They've got the academic side correct. It looks accurate. The on-paper numbers are accurate, and even the sound is accurate. But then when it comes to practice, it's way off. So my overall score is going to have to be the lowest of the series so far, unfortunately, with a D. But if this is your first ever episode of Game vs. Real, I would urge you to check out the previous ones, because this is the worst score so far and the other ones did a lot better. We've tested Test Drive Unlimited 2, Forza Motorsport 4, Forza Horizon 4, and even Ride 3, with a motorcycle comparison as well. So check out those episodes, you can click the playlist here on screen to see those, and of course, stick around on the channel for more, and I do have more of these episodes coming soon, including for Gran Turismo 6. So stick around for that one, and until next time I'll see you then, but for now, as always, thanks for watching.